Welcome to Indie Film Experience.
I'm Zach Lona.
This is Zach Lona, my guest for today. He's the writer, director, and world builder of He Who Lives in Hidden Lakes.
And Zach was my cinematographer on the same film.
I was. I'm rolling now. Zach, thanks for coming.
Zach, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start this thing off, and let's let you share the story of how we met.
Sure.
And then I will, if there's anything that I need to answer, just cue me in.
Yeah, totally. So I met Zach at a film meetup here in Chicago. I think it was 2 years ago or last year.
A year?
The years are all blending together.
I think
for
it was
me,
like a year ago.
honestly. It feels like it was a little bit more than that.
It could be like a year and a couple months.
Well,
sure.
Anyway, it was a film meetup where people would screen certain projects, and we got to talking about experimental film a little bit and the goings on. And I remember you recommended me a film which I still haven't watched, but
okay.
it's La Jetée. And the conceit of that film, it was made in the 50s or something, and it's basically all still photography, but it's cinema, so it tells a moving image story. And I was like, oh, okay, this guy knows a little something about the things that aren't Marvel movies and whatnot. Not anything against those so much, but we'd ran into each other times following, and we just kind of got familiar with each other. I got familiar with your corn dip, which is so good.
That's Alyssa's doing.
Oh, it's Alyssa's?
Yes.
Well, it's an incredible recipe.
Yes. For those interested, cream cheese, shoe peg corn. That's important. Not sweet corn. Shoe peg corn.
Shoe peg corn.
It's hard to find, but it's in a can. And chopped up jalapeno. That's it.
Oh, so good.
And you just melt it in the damn microwave.
It's
and
delicious.
Reheat it. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, even though I know, tell me about the story. What is this film about?
So the film's about, it's a mockumentary about a cryptid, which, if you don't know, is a sort of genre of monster like Bigfoot or Loch Ness Monster. And this monster is known as the Hidden Man. And the Hidden Man lives in this town called Hidden Lakes, Illinois. It's a fictional suburb of Chicago. And the mockumentary aspect of it follows three specific characters. One of them is a mystic enthusiast who supposedly can telepathically commune with the Hidden Man. The other is a cult priestess who has established a religion worshiping the Hidden Man as a messiah. And then the last character is a rogue cop who has a certain vendetta against the Hidden Man, and he lives in the woods trying to find him.
Okay. So a couple of questions. One being, where does such an elaborate idea stem from?
Sure. So I got the idea on my first day at work after graduating college. And I remember that day very specifically because, like I was telling you earlier over dinner, I've been working at pretty much the same office since like my freshman year of college. So essentially coming out of college, I was working the same job I was at in college. And this was my first day back after graduating. And I sat down at the same desk I'd been sitting at, and I just took a look around, and I was like, okay, I could do this, or I could go live in the woods for the rest of my life. And it just kind of sort of spiraled out from there. Because one thing I forgot to mention is that the Hidden Man monster, if you look at it, it's essentially just a crazy bum or hobo. Mm-hmm. Everyone in the town thinks that it's some sort of monster, but to us, the viewers, it's a lot more ridiculous than that. So the idea kind of started like as a meditation on like, okay, what would it be like to just sort of exit society on a whole? And then it sort of just snowballed into this huge endeavor that it is now.
Interesting. Are there any sort of film or story influences that kind of pose on the screenplay or the film itself the way it stands now?
I don't think so. Not in the conception of it, at least. I don't usually look to film or art in general as a means of like inspiration in terms of like I'm referencing this, and this set of like aesthetic principles or styles that somebody else has already done. That being said, like some filmmakers that have been like a huge influence in how I conceive of this have been Werner Herzog. Harmony Korine is a pretty big influence on me. Alejandro Jodorowsky is probably, he didn't start out as the biggest influence on this project, but he's sort of, his work has gotten to that point where it's like probably the central influence on the development of the project. Jodorowsky has done El Topo, which was like regarded as like the first like kind of cult classic movie, and The Holy Mountain, which is like this Gnostic alchemical journey through like the ills of contemporary society, and it follows these characters' journeys up the Holy Mountain.
Okay. I'm not familiar with his work.
It's really unique.
Okay.
It's really unique. It's very visual, and it's very. He's got a signature thing going on that doesn't. His work is entirely his own. You should check it out. It's pretty interesting.
Okay.
It's not for everyone, but
Gotcha.
It's very striking.
Okay. Okay, so we've talked about the story. We've talked about influences on you as a filmmaker and an artist. So why this story right now?
I'm glad you asked that. Because I chose to do this project at this point in my life, because at the beginning of, I think 2018 it was again after college, and you know, you go through that whole like post-college funk where it's like,
it's just sad.
What am I doing with my life, you know? So at that point, I already knew that I wanted to make films as a career, in whatever capacity that manifests. So at the beginning of the new year in 2018, I said I want to shoot a feature film in 2019. So by that point, I already had a gamut of ideas for screenplays and, you know, all this and whatnot. So I took a look at all of them and assessed them based on like, okay, what can I do with the resources that I will have in 2019? And it just turned out that this one was the one that seemed most feasible at the time. And I guess it was, because we did it. And the final cut, or it's not, the final cut is on the horizon. It's currently at like an hour, 42 minutes.
What's your goal date-wise to have Picture Lock?
Picture Lock, I definitely want to have done like within the next month.
Okay.
I think would be good.
So like into November?
Yeah, end of November, definitely. Definitely before the holidays. And I think, I mean, I've been working on it pretty consistently since we've wrapped, so I think that's pretty reasonable. The only thing, the next step of the process right now actually is doing test screenings. I want to bring other people into it outside of like our sort of group, and just kind of like open it up to people and see, you know, what their reactions are.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Do you know where you're going to be doing those?
No, Anthony suggested doing Second City, and then just like renting a room at Second City, and just, you know, I've also submitted it to IFP for their rough cut screening program, and I'm waiting back to hear about them. I've also sent it to like just friends, and you know.
So for those that don't know, what is IFP?
IFP is the Independent Film Project, which is a nonprofit. I think it's nationwide, but they have a Chicago branch here, and it's basically just like a nonprofit that supplies resources and education to independent filmmakers in the community, and you can get a membership, and that one of the benefits that membership offers you is applying for a rough cut screening through their network and their resources, and they got a bunch of other great stuff going on too. I think we're both members, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
earlier you had mentioned resources that you knew you had or that you thought that you would have come 2019. What were those resources?
Well, money. First of all, I figured that I could save up enough money by then, in addition with the savings that I had at that point, to have a budget to, do something reasonable. It'd still be micro budget, ultra low budget. But one of the big things that I wanted to do with this was to pay people for their labor. That's important to me as a filmmaker and as a businessman, which I also sort of have to see myself as, and I think we all do. But yeah, that was important to me. I think most of the budget went to paying people a wage for their labor. And also, a big part of it was, as we learned, most of this movie takes place in the woods. And nature looks great, and it's pretty much free. So that means that we didn't have to spend a lot of money on locations. Another aspect of it was a lot of the production design and art department elements were made of like literal garbage and trash and just detritus that you could pick up off the street or in a junkyard or something like that. So that also means we didn't have to spend a whole lot of money on art materials. I will add, if you're at a point in your career where like you can't pay people, I'm not necessarily against that, but I'm not like speaking from my high horse here where like, oh, he made a film because he was able to pay people. Of course that comes into it, but yeah, if it's like something that should be decided for yourself and the people that you're working with.
Absolutely,
for sure.
So are you comfortable talking about budget?
I don't know about numbers,
okay,
but
that's fair. So do you mind my asking then, like, is the majority of the budget just from your personal savings, or
yeah.
how did you pull funds?
Yeah, basically it was all from my personal savings. We did a IndieGoGo, which was very successful. I consider it very successful. We made, I think, it was like under $900, which was like a huge help. I think we set our goal at like $10,000 because it's like you gotta aim big or go home, But it was at a point where that was another thing too. I when I was speaking with Anthony, our producer, about how to raise money for the project, another reason why I chose this project is because of the flexibility in spending. It could have been done on a fraction of the budget that it was, with a like minimal loss of quality. It may have, doing it at a lower budget may have gotten into the fact of like, oh, maybe I can't pay people, and even though that's important to me, I want to make a movie in 2019, right? So It's got to happen. So that was another reason why I chose this project, because the budget was, in my mind, able to scale to the needs of what the budget actually is.
Oh, something that I've been very curious about ever since we filmed the thing was, what was your casting process like? Because everybody is fantastic in the
Isn't everyone so good?
It's amazing. All the improv. Like I had such a hard time most of the film, like keeping my composure, or like even at times like fighting back emotions that I was feeling, because I'm right there with the actors,
Right.
So it's like, I don't know. I can't speak to any of it, obviously, because it's not out yet. But once the film is released, we got to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, actors, how'd you find them?
Actors, it was like a mixed bag. Full disclosure, totally nepotistically casted my brother in one of the lead roles because he was right for the part. Right?
Yeah.
It was funny because that particular role, he plays Officer Garrett Walden, who's the cop. I sort of like, I wrote the role for him, and I also sort of just realized that he's like the perfect guy to cast in this role. So kind of like, as I was writing it kind of just like molded together where it's like, okay, yeah, Lucas is the perfect person to cast this. And a lot of the other roles, it was. I think I told Tom Hush and Connor Cornelius this on No Coast Cinema, which is a great podcast about Chicago film and the industry here. Jeff and I check it out.
Agreed.
But I told them I cast a lot based on just like how a person looks, right? Like I had backstage ads going on throughout, and what made me click on someone was how well they lined up to what I had in my mind for how the character looked. And I don't know why that worked out so well, because it seems like I should be more open-minded. But it worked out great. And like, for instance, Sarah Kopp, who's probably the lead in the film. She plays Margaret.
She lives in this neighborhood.
Oh, she does?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I saw her and her daughter like 2 days after filming.
Oh, really?
She's like, Zach?
That's funny. She's a gem.
Yeah.
She's so nice.
She's amazing.
But yeah, I just found her on Backstage, and I sort of just went through her reel, and I was really moved by some of her performances. I thought, in looking at her and in looking at the performances she had, I knew that she could capture this sort of grace and this sort of poise to the character, while playing it in such a way that the humorous parts are still humorous, you know. So, and then Kevin Gomez, who plays Oracle Joe, the mystic enthusiast, I actually went to high school with him. He's got a background in voice acting and Shakespearean theater, so I always kind of had him in mind for that role as well, because it just seemed to fit. It just seemed to fit. And then there was a lot of people who Anthony found where I had less stringent criteria for what the character is. For instance, the two vlogger characters, who are probably the funniest roles in the entire movie, in my opinion. We did not cast those until a week before shooting, and I had not met Nora and Pete until like we were on set, because Anthony just got them and he was like, we need roles and you're going to be perfect too. So I didn't even cast them. Okay. They just showed up to set. And
I was always curious of like where it kind of broke up, you know, between like people that you found versus like people that were just kind of like, hey, we need someone.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was a pretty even spread altogether, because there was like a lot of roles for this, which it didn't even occur to me, like how weird that is for an indie film. I guess because you're usually supposed to do like just, you know, keep the cast light, but for, you know, logistical reasons. But for some reason it made out where we could have this giant cast.
Yeah.
So the way I found them was pretty evenly spread through those techniques.
Okay.
I think, actually, not to like toot my own horn, but I think the improvisational element really helped capture a lot of that energy, because the movie is entirely improvised from a dialogue standpoint, and a lot of the situations were also improvised.
Yeah, speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, so basically how I wrote this, I didn't have a screenplay for it. I've written scripts in the past before this project, but I had tried writing a script for this one, but it wasn't clicking. Like, I kept on trying to write it and rewrite it, and there was just something not happening with it. Because I had always conceived it as a mockumentary, I decided to sort of let it live in a space that's less defined, where I said, okay, these are the events that I want to happen, these are the scenes that we're going to capture, but in terms of the actual dialogue and like the blocking that I had in mind, it was completely open. And I think that helped people kind of get into a spot with the roles where there wasn't really an expectation to perform. So it kind of lifted away the anxiety a little bit of performing. That's just my assessment of it. You can talk to the many talented people we had on set to see what their take is and what they thought of that. But the results are pretty good. I'm very satisfied with how it was improvised.
Just based off the cut that I was lucky enough to see so far, has there been any point in the post-production process where you wish you would have had something more structured, or is it more beneficial?
No, I think it's more beneficial. In fact, I think I might have written too much.
Okay. What
Because-
do you mean?
Because there's a certain aspect of the story that I won't divulge what it is actually, but
You can tell me in secret.
sure, it's Walden's story.
Okay.
The cop.
Yeah.
And I originally had my conception for that character was that he was like a kind of like a hunter character, and we were kind of just like following him like on his hunt, and we don't really necessarily like invest in him as a character. But as I was going on writing his story, I got really deeply invested in his character. So I wanted to write scenes that explored more of that. And we shot a lot of those scenes, and then a lot of those scenes got cut because it was fat, basically. It sort of like whipped me back to where I originally started with the character, where he needs to be less detailed in order to be more impactful, in order to serve the story in a greater sense. And the other thing too is like one of the things I did with Sarah in particular, and a lot with Kevin, was that I wrote pretty detailed backstories of their characters, like down to like nitty gritty details. And then for the rest of the members of the cult, I like pretty much outlined their entire belief system, and none of that shows up in the film at all. But I think it was definitely necessary to capture that, to allow the people who would be playing these characters to inhabit their subconscious life. If they have this detailed experience of what they believe, what they're like going into the woods in order to worship to do, that adds an element in the subtext of the film that really just, you feel the presence of it, in my opinion. But in terms of the writing of it, you don't hear about how the Hidden Man is an ascended master of the sixth ray or whatever. Like that doesn't come.
I didn't even know that was a detail.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah. A lot of the cult stuff is based on like actual esoteric religious practices. So
I kind of picked up that vibe based off of some of the things that they were doing, that it was like pulling from multiple religious sects.
yeah,
I found that beautiful. It wasn't like I don't think, at least from what I've seen and what I witnessed on set, it wasn't in any way offensive.
I'm glad to hear that.
It was more so. It seemed to be just kind of like an homage to religion itself, in a way.
Yeah.
And I really liked that.
I
Like you
appreciate
created another one because like it's a mockumentary. At the end of the day, like it's fun.
Right.
It's for me at least. It's hard to get mad at stuff that's intended to be fun or funny.
Right.
And like there's obviously a boundary, and you didn't even, in my mind and with my perspective, I don't think you got close to that line.
That's good to hear, because one thing that I really did not want to do is make fun of anything at all. I didn't want to make it seem like I'm creating these characters to put them in a circus to be laughed at. These characters are supposed to be relatable from a spiritual perspective, because a lot of the thematic content of the film is a meditation on faith and ideas and religions and stuff, and there's this very deep subtext that you can read into it should you choose, and I think you've done that, and I think it's really nice to hear that boundary is not crossed.
That's just me though. I don't know. So we talked about the cast and how great they are. Let's talk about the crew. How did you find them? And what was it like working with your first like full-fledged crew? Because this was your first crew, correct?
Yeah, it was the first real movie crew. It was really stripped down, as you're very familiar with.
Oh yes.
But it was the first real movie crew.
What was that like for you?
It was good. I like telling people what to do. I'm just kidding. No. It was funny because you were the first person I had in mind to shoot it, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to work on it or not, and I was too shy to ask. So once you referred Anthony to me as the producer, and he agreed to come on board, thank God you guys are friends, because he's like, Zach needs to shoot this. So I'm like, okay, that problem's solved.
That's it. That's awesome.
And then, Dom coming on board too. I mean, you guys it's incredible to watch you guys work, because you guys know so much about the technicalities of things that I just don't know.
That's what we're there for.
Yeah.
Just take care of it. So we still had art team, sound. Talk on those two teams.
Yeah, absolutely. So the production design in the art department was probably my central concern on the crew side going into it. Because I actually shot some of this movie shortly after the new year in 2018. So basically, shortly after I shot that, I was at SAIC's MFA graduate exhibition at Sullivan Galleries on State Street, and I turned the corner of the gallery and I saw this huge trash pile, but it was like an installation. It wasn't a pile. It was like a
structure.
It was a structure. It was like a sculpture, but it was an installation. And it was made by Jenna Boyles, who is our production designer on the film. And so she comes from like a fine art context, which I also come from. So I emailed her just, out of the blue, saying like, hey, I really loved your work at the MFA exhibition. And I think your aesthetic is exactly what I'm looking for this film. Would you be interested in coming aboard as our production designer? And she emailed me back shortly afterwards and was like, you know what, funny enough, I've been thinking about getting into film. So from that point on, we pretty much met weekly from like February to up until like the week before shooting, just working on like all the set pieces and all the costumes and basically like anything designed that you see on screen, in conjunction with Samia, our art director. So I worked really closely with the art department going into it, because this idea is so weird and so like specific. It's like the aesthetic of it is primarily defined within like the set design and the costume design and stuff like that. So I really wanted to make sure that stuff was right to a T, and it was.
That was fantastic. Everything that they did, I couldn't believe that they pulled off what they did.
It's incredible.
In the time that they were allotted.
Yeah.
And because you had spoke about Jenna's background, and I talked with Samia a little bit on set, and just like getting a feel of like how long she's been doing film and whatnot. And she actually studied architecture.
Yeah.
And she was like an architect.
Yep.
Which is just crazy.
Which is also makes her perfect for this film, because a lot of the pretty much every set piece was like a massive structure.
Yes.
So, and then she also did, Samia also did a couple of the more conventional sets, like Oracle Joe's room, where he lives and does his interview, and then also Walden's campsite, which looks phenomenal.
Yes. Yeah, big fan of both of those, especially whenever, I just remember in pre-production, emailing a little bit back and forth with her, and she sent over a diagram of Oracle Joe's bedroom.
Yeah.
And I was blown away by the accuracy, like in the space. I was like, well, I know what I could do based off these sketches, but I didn't know like how accurate it was to the location itself.
Yeah.
But it was...
And it
was spot on.
She had never been to that location before. I just sent her pictures of the room.
It was perfect. Like I went in, I was like, this is exactly what was shown on paper.
Right.
So impressed. The art team was amazing.
Yeah.
And then just because I know, I'm going to push you.
Sure.
Sound was the hardest role to fill, was it not?
Yeah, it was.
Why is that?
I don't know. I really do not know. Like we went through, like one guy was like in Indiana, and we would have had to like lodge him, which that's something I would have done differently. Is I would have had some different accommodation for the crew. So you guys wouldn't have to commute back and forth. I'm so sorry.
That was awful.
I know, I'm so sorry. I didn't even think that would be a thing, but it was. So I apologize for that. You can smack me if you want.
I'm not going to do that.
We had a lot of difficulty filling that role because there was only one person. Our crew on this was like super tight.
Yep.
Super gorilla, super skeleton crew. So we only had one person on the sound for each day, and we ended up going with 2 different people because of their availability and everything, all the logistics of the production. And that was Peru Samal and Andrew Ford. And Peru, I think we got from Bethany, who was our first AD. So he was a recommendation from her. And then Andrew Ford is actually a kid from Bolingbrook not a kid, but he's a guy from Bolingbrook that I knew just from high school and
So you went to high school with Andrew?
Yeah,
Okay.
He went to BHS. I think he's a little bit younger than Lucas.
Okay.
The biggest part with sound I'm finding in post was that just like with anything else, any other project, it's like location noise. Like unless you're like interiors.
I mean, we were really, really close to a highway.
Yeah, there's
most of the
nothing
time.
you can do for that.
Yeah.
Outside of get better locations for that, but outside of that, they were the perfect locations. So there's only so much you can do. But that being said, it's not super bad. And I was talking with Zach Lewand, our sound guy, 3 Zachs. 3. And he said that a lot of it can be worked with.
Okay.
It could be mended.
Are you going to have to do any sort of ADR?
I think in a couple spots we will. But based on his assessment, not a whole lot. Not a whole lot.
Okay.
Which is a blessing.
Yeah.
Because I would rather not do that.
There's more money you can save, of course.
Exactly.
Of course. Okay, so cherry on top, Bethany Berg.
Bethany Berg. Bethany, I owe you my life. Bethany was instrumental in facilitating everything. It was funny, I neglected to let everyone know to contact her for any logistical questions or first AD stuff. Mm-hmm. So throughout the shoot, I would just be getting text messages from people while also trying to direct a movie, and I just had to be just contact Bethany, and she was on it. She made sure everyone got to set. She made sure that everyone was fed, and
had sunscreen.
We had sunscreen, bug spray. Don't ever shoot a movie in the woods. Biggest lesson coming out of that.
At least in the summertime, I don't know.
In the summertime,
mosquito in Illinois.
The
mosquitoes were just so bad.
I'm sorry.
No, I think if there's one thing that's just unforgivable, it's the amount of mosquito bites that I had on my body. Yeah. But outside of that, it couldn't have worked out better.
Yeah.
For the sake of the story, it was absolutely perfect.
Yeah. I think I don't know, even throughout all that, it's the whole thing went as well as it possibly could have, which is really good.
Even the light there was a whole week where it was supposed to just downpour thunderstorm rain,
and it didn't.
It did, but in the evening after we had wrapped,
right?
Somehow
we got caught in the rain once,
one time,
right as we wrapped,
as we were leaving.
Yeah.
So let's chat a little bit about the work that you did with Anthony.
Anthony basically supplied pretty much half the cast. It was based on referrals from him, and that alone, based on the performances, is just nuts how he was able to do that. And honestly, Anthony's my father. He was my dad.
Your film dad.
Yeah, my film dad. Because it's a very emotional process as you're putting this together and as you're sort of trying to get it off the ground. And it's just nice to feel like you're not alone in it, you know? Like, Anthony had my back the entire time, and he was always willing to sort of, like, drop things and, you know, supply whatever was needed, like, no questions asked. And I just really felt like he was like an ally in our conquest, you know? He was like the band of brothers or something, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It was we met like pretty much on a weekly basis throughout the probably 6-month period leading up to shooting, and then in the weeks prior to shooting, he organized all the like crew meetings that we put together, and just like made sure that everyone was on the same page during pre-production and like just tying it all up. Basically, he was the guy to like glue it all together. And like booking rehearsal spaces and stuff like that, like all the odds and ends stuff, Anthony took care of, which was a huge weight off my shoulders, so that I could focus on like making sure that all the artistic elements were accounted for. And that's what you want out of a producer, right? Like you want a good head on a good set of shoulders, and that's what Anthony's got.
And like the manners that he has and his grit.
Yes.
To get things done.
The grit, that's the word that encapsulates it.
Yeah.
For me.
He is a maniac when it comes to just getting shit done.
Yes.
I don't know how he does the things he does.
And also he's a maniac in the movie, because he's in the movie.
Oh, that's true.
At a certain point.
I forgot about that.
And that's so funny too. Oh my god. He's like dancing.
I want to talk about that so bad.
He's busted. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
He's busting moves. There's a huge set piece in one scene, and Anthony is there in a floral print shirt, and he is getting down.
He's dancing.
He's dancing. That's all he's doing.
He danced so hard, he was sore for the next like 3 to 4 days, I think.
Are you serious?
Yes.
I didn't hear that from him.
Yes, he was sore. Yep. He went after it. And
that is on camera, baby.
I know. It's beautiful. I've never seen moves like that.
And it's like he becomes part of the set.
He does.
He's like a moving part of the environment that the characters are
he gets a lot of screen time in that scene, I noticed, too.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Oh, yeah, and quick shout-out to my parents for opening their house as the production office for 10 days. Mom and Dad, I love you.
Steve and Helen, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know I said it, I don't know how many times. I know at least twice I said thanks for the hospitality. But fantastic people, your parents.
I love them.
Good. You should. They're great set of parents you got there.
Cool parents, bro.
Yeah. So tell us about the schedule of which you created and what dictated that schedule.
You're going to hate me for this.
Go ahead.
I literally said, we are shooting it at this point during these days, all in a row, because I want to get this fucking over with.
Okay.
Not knowing the implications of what that actually meant. My friends, do not shoot a feature film in 10 days
Straight.
Never do that.
When would you say the breaking point is? Like, not breaking point is, well, I guess technically, I felt broken day 9.
Yeah.
If I'm honest.
It was when I got my eye hit, honestly.
Oh, that was bad.
Like, that was probably the point where I'm like, I am at my wit's end. Because for those of you who don't know, I was helping build the set in the woods, and it involved tree branches, and then essentially a tree branch fell on my eye, and I had a corneal abrasion for the rest of the shoot. That was on like day 7 or 8. And I was trying to keep it together, man. That was like some of the worst pain I've ever experienced. And
I
I'm
can't
like,
even imagine.
On top of trying to direct a movie through that, I was
remember
like,
at one point you brought Lucas on to like help.
Yeah, that's where I was at. I mean, Lucas he's directed films,
Yes.
He's directed shorts and stuff. So it was good to have him. Thank God he wasn't acting those days, because it made me feel spiritually good to, like, you know, have my literal brother there supporting. Because, man, like, that was rough.
Yeah, it was tough. That especially, like, on top of the exhaustion that I know that we were all feeling because we were just going and going.
Yeah,
that was just unnecessary to happen.
Yeah.
The eye incident.
Well, it was also unnecessary to shoot it in 10 days, which I quickly realized. So I wouldn't do that again. That's something that I would have done. I also, like I said earlier, I would have tried to arrange something where people weren't commuting from the city and carpooling from the city, because that was a huge psychological toll on you guys, as I understand it. And I feel bad for putting people through that.
How could you know? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess because it's not like I didn't think about that. I didn't think about it hard, but it crossed my mind that, like, okay, I'm like, this is how we're doing it.
Yeah.
And I think the place where I was coming at it from was like, okay, I spent like, not like trying to get into comparisons or anything, but like, oh yeah, commuting is reasonable from the city to the suburbs. Like, I took the train back and forth for, 3.5, 4 hours every day for like a year. Like, it's a normal thing to do. But I think it's different when you're on a film set and not behind a desk.
Yeah.
So that was like my thought process behind
I see.
it.
On that note, what would you say is something in hindsight that you wish that you would have done differently? Or what do you think your biggest blunder was?
I think the scheduling and logistical stuff, which was all up to me. It was just like a matter of like naivety and the fact that I hadn't done something like this before. Yeah, I mean, we got it done, everyone's safe except for if someone had to get hurt on my set, I'm glad it was me.
Yes.
Thank God. But yeah, I think artistically, it's all there. It's all there. I think that you and I and Dom, if we had to shoot it again, which thank God we don't, I probably would have primed you guys a little bit more on like what we're actually shooting. I think I tried to do that a little bit, but I also wanted to like scale back the camera department to like emulate like a verite approach, where I'm kind of like dropping you guys into a scenario and we're kind of like figuring it out on the spot, kind of like how it's
That's exactly how it was.
Right.
Figuring it out.
And like the interiors that we did light looked fantastic, but we didn't light anything to any like huge extent at all.
Right.
And that's what I wanted.
Yeah. I mean, we had to move fast was part of it too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was challenging, especially like trying to figure out where to place the camera at certain times was very challenging. Trying to run, so we did run 2 cameras throughout most of the film.
Yeah.
And at some points that got in the way of actually getting the scene going.
Right.
Like for instance, trying to get a wide shot and a close up with 2 cameras without either crossing the 180 or it being a little bit too extreme for one way or another, it was just wasting time. Like we could have like shot the scene,
Exactly.
But
yeah, all those snags are. It again goes back to like the logistical planning aspect of it.
Right.
Because the way it looks fantastic. Like you guys did a fantastic job with like, just how it looks.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
But yeah, like in terms of like saving time, I probably would have spent more time with the camera department. And,
Right.
try to find a balance between like the verite style and like getting the production moving.
Right. Yeah. It would have been helpful. It was just like it was hard. It was like especially challenging trying to because I had full faith in the shot list that you had created because I had worked with you a couple days in the winter.
Yeah.
And it was like pretty smooth sailing. So I also naively assumed that that's how the 10-day production was going to go.
Right.
Like, oh, it's just going to be like that.
Right.
Like, I can turn to you and be like, what does this mean? But you weren't always there to ask. Or like because of art department and everything else and everyone else that you kind of have to more or less dictate on a film set.
Right.
It's like hard to get your attention to be like, okay, yes, but what is it that we're filming here?
Right.
As the cinematographer, I feel like I have partial responsibility in the way that the set is supposed to go. Mm-hmm. And if it's unorganized in my department, then it's like we can't go.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know that any of that was particularly my fault, but also like I can't help but wish that I could have been more prepared for the role. But after hearing your perspective of like that was kind of part of the process that you wanted to kind of have.
Yeah.
That unpredictability and the like people really not knowing what's going to happen next.
Yeah. Yeah, aesthetically, that was definitely built in. And what I mean to say is that if we had to do it again, I would have wanted to explore how I could have made you feel more comfortable within that aesthetic choice.
I see.
Because that aesthetic choice also then becomes a logistical choice.
Right.
Which did cause problems. And it made you feel less prepared, which I would have liked to avoid. But
Okay.
again, it's like... And at the end of the day, too, it's like we didn't miss anything, which is also mind-blowing.
Yeah.
We didn't miss anything, and... Well, we had to do a pickup day.
Hey, man,
But, like, everything-
everyone's got a pickup day.
Exactly. And, like, everything looks exactly how I want it to look.
That's good.
So...
Well, Dom, we did our jobs.
Sorry, Dom.
How would you rate your overall experience with your first feature?
Do you mean like how I performed, or like just the experience of shooting a feature film?
The experience.
I think it was great. I would do it again. If I had to give it like a star rating,
Sure.
I use the 5 scale.
Okay.
I don't like the 10 scale. It's a little redundant.
Don't blame you.
I would give it a 4 out of 5, and the star off is only like the logistical hell that it was. And I feel like, at a certain level, that's going to be a lot of sets.
Yeah, I would agree. There's always something that like comes up.
Right.
But as you now know, like after working on this and then shorts, like what we did this last weekend, like you kind of got to build in the hell into the schedule.
Right.
Knowing that it's forever there. Like nothing will ever go smoothly, period.
Exactly.
And it's just like, I don't know. I feel like, and I haven't shot a feature, or I haven't directed a feature.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I haven't done it yet. But having been a part of what is now, so like I DP'd Hidden Lakes. Prior to that, I shot my friend Sean Freeman's film Sink. And that was my first feature film experience doing cinematography. And just based off of those two experiences alone in that position, learning to let go of like what is in your mind and just capturing what's in front of you was probably the biggest lessons that I've learned in capturing things.
Oh yeah.
Because I always have in mind of like how the location will look. For some dumb reason, when I read the script, I imagine the space. I'm like, ooh, we could do this and that. And then I see it, and it's like, that's not at all
Right.
what I thought it was going to look like. Especially with yours, like in the woods, it's like, it's the woods. It's different everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one spot in the woods is the same, which is kind of the beauty as well. Because we could make, like, if you just turned around, it looked like a totally different area of the woods.
Yeah.
Or like 5 feet away from you looked like a mile and a half away.
Exactly.
It
was so funny. We were shooting like when we had to shoot an interview of like Charlie or something. It'd be like, okay, we're shooting this interview right here, but then we got to go back in like the script and like in Act 3, and we got to shoot another interview. So Charlie, stand right here, and now we're in a totally different spot.
Yeah.
So it's just that's totally right.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, and we actually shot on our pickup day, that was like a really climactic moment. That was supposed to be in like this really desolate area, and it was like right next to a set piece. But
Yes.
you don't ever see the set piece.
No.
So
So this is a question that I feel like you might have already answered, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And it's a question that I'm taking from some of my favorite film podcasts and things like that, in film informational, whatever. To someone that's going to be doing their first feature, or they're going to be doing their first film endeavor, period, what advice would you give them?
I would say have a vision. Have a really strong picture in your head of exactly what you want, and then do everything in your power to express that while still leaving room to account for things that aren't going to go as planned. Because I feel like there's more content being made right now than there ever has been. So in our saturated culture of images and media right now, I think that it's really important that I'm not contributing to the noise, that I'm having something that cuts through the noise with something that can really add value to people's lives in a very like concrete sense. And that's really important to me. And it kind of like, it doesn't rub me the wrong way, but it kind of like breaks my heart when I see like a lot of talent put into a project that just doesn't really do anything for anyone. You know,
Mm-hmm.
It's a process too. Like you have to like put in the work to get to a point where your work shines at that level. And I hope mine has done that, but it's not really my place to assess that. I leave that to the world. But when I operate and I'm creating a artwork, whether it's like a piece of music or a film or a painting, I want it to stand out. Because I think we as artists have that responsibility. What you're doing when you're making a film is no small thing. We survive on images and sounds in our aesthetic lives that we experience through art. That's what propels life. So in doing that, you are like a magician or an alchemist, and what you're contributing to the world isn't necessarily concrete in its effects or its value, but it does have a certain value like that. And I think that value is really underrated, and it's really important that you not make garbage.
As hard as it is to do.
As hard as it is to do. And if you end up with garbage,
make garbage at aid.
Yeah, it's do something, man. Like either say you shot your shot and give it up, or be really sure that the next one you're gonna do is worthwhile.
That's got to be some. It's probably more than somebody's worst fear.
Oh yeah,
That's
my worst fear.
That you just make a pile of shit.
Yeah.
I
don't think we've done that at all, but
I don't either. I think at the least, which is actually a pretty big fucking deal, you have managed to make a movie for a niche audience that doesn't know that they want this film. So I fail to describe it as a cult classic type of film, but I think it's a movie that's directed to an area of film goers that enjoy films like Beach Bum, by Harmony Korine. Like it's those types of film watchers that I think that this film, that Hidden Lakes, is for. Like the people that embrace the oddities of life, and the people that do strive to to cut the bullshit and to like, I don't know. Because what I think, based off of the 2-hour cut that I got to see, one thing that was fact was that it was entertaining.
That's good to hear.
I was entertained.
It's just a movie, man.
It is just a movie. That's true. Well, thanks for sitting down with me and chatting on my couch.
I love this couch. It's really comfy.
It's great.
Reminds me of like
Thanks, Rob.
my grandpa's couch or something.
I don't know. It's like this old leather couch that was in Alyssa's dad's basement.
Oh yeah.
It's perfect.
I love it.
It was a pain in the ass to get up the stairs up here.
I don't even want to think about that.
Oh my God. Did I tell you how we got the box springs up here for the
No.
bed? I'll have to tell you that.
Did you put them through the window?
No. So I have like this 500 feet of rope, and over the stairs, like whenever you're going down, you can see over the railing.
Yeah.
And I had to go up to the 3rd story and toss it down, and Alyssa like wrapped it around the mattress, and I pulled it up to the 3rd floor, and then she like hugged it in to
Holy
our
crap.
floor. And then I came down the stairs and we pulled it in, because God bless Dom and Anthony for helping us move most of our stuff in here. The box springs was like the thing that like, we're getting it in. We're not going to accept failure, but they had to.
It was that hard.
It was really
Oh,
hard.
man.
Like the fucking box springs sat downstairs. I contemplated just tossing it. He was like, well, we could just throw it on the ground.
That's like an ingenious way to fix that problem, though. It's like get some rope and
Yeah, we just
haul it up, man.
It was Alyssa's idea.
Oh, that's great.
She's like, if it doesn't work, we throw it away. I'm like,
Yeah.
cool, because I paid like $600 for that fucking bed. Like the mattress. You know, it's like beds are they depreciate just like a vehicle, maybe even
Yep.
worse. Anyway, so I already said thanks for being on here tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Zach.
Thanks for being on here, Zach.
Thanks for... One more time. Let's roll it again.
Okay. Zach, thanks for being on here.
Zach, thanks for having me.
We're not going to get it.